This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
بكم من جديد. 40,000 سنة هو مجموع الأحكام التي صدرت بحق 21 متهما.
The total combined prison sentences of 21 suspects in the 2004 Madrid train bombing equals 40,000 years. 7 suspects were acquitted, which discontented the victims' families, who were also unsatisfied with the compensation assigned to them by the court. Fahima Mazani reports.
A mass of security officers filled the streets surrounding the courthouse. This was not surprising, as those cars transported the most dangerous defendants in Spain's history, 27 men and 1 woman suspected of being involved in Madrid's train bombing. The bombing occurred on March 11, 2004, leaving 191 persons dead. Inside the courtroom, the judge opened the final session by reading the trial summary, whose verdict took 4 months to reach.
2
Moroccans and a Spaniard charged with providing ammunition to the bombers were sentenced to a total of 40,000 years in prison. The other 18 suspects received varying sentences, while 7 other suspects were acquitted. Atop the list of those acquitted was Uthman Saeed Ahmad, known as Mohammed the Egyptian, who'd been imprisoned in Italy for 8 years. The victims' families were not satisfied with the verdict.
I feel like I've been deceived. Many facts were not revealed and the real criminals are free.
I am disappointed with the judiciary system. It is too lenient.
I want to reiterate that the organization I represent will appeal this verdict. We will go to the Supreme Court and our lawyers will ask for all the clauses of the verdict to be re-evaluated.
Included in the clauses of the verdict is compensation in the amount of 1.5 million euros to the victims' families, but this amount might not be sufficient in erasing the Spaniards' memory of the awfulness of that day in March.
نفى رئيس الوزراء التركي رجب طيب أردوغان أن تكون أنقرة قد قررت إغلاق.
Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Ankara has decided not to close down its airspace to flights to and from northern Iraq. However, Turkish Foreign Minister Ali Babacan said that some of the sanctions against the Kurdish rebels and their supporters have been implemented on the ground, including restricting flights from Turkish airports to northern Iraq. Video images of the area along the Turkish-Iraqi border near the Khabur crossing point show Turkish trucks full of products still going inside Iraq. This morning, Turkish forces were seen patrolling the border area, which could be in preparation for the military operation in northern Iraq. Turkish soldiers combed the border area in search of landmines and explosive devices, which are the preferred weapons used by the armed Kurds. Joining us, the bureau chief for Al Jazeera in Ankara, Yusuf Al-Sharif. Yusuf, let's start with the sanctions that were imposed by the Turkish government on the Kurdish region in Iraq, especially pertaining to flights. Do you have any details?
Abdelkader, these sanctions were not imposed against the government of the Kurdish region in Iraq because Turkey does not recognize it. A clear distinction must be made, as it explains the contradictory statements made by the Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan and the Turkish Foreign Minister. Yes, the Turkish National Security Council wants to impose sanctions on the Kurdish region, but the problem is that Turkey only recognizes the central government in Baghdad. Until now, Turkey does not recognize the government of the Kurdish region in Iraq. Thus, if Turkish officials were to say that the sanctions were imposed on the Kurdish government, then this would be a de facto recognition of it. This explains why the Turkish Foreign Ministry emphasized that the sanctions will be imposed on companies, individuals and parties. The sanctions will not be imposed on the so-called Kurdish region in Iraq because Turkey does not recognize the region. This is why Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that Ankara has decided not to close its airspace to flights in and from northern Iraq, while the Turkish Foreign Minister Ali Babashan said that some planes will not be allowed to go to certain areas of Iraq. More contradictory statements will most likely be made in the future for technical reasons. For example, Babashan said that some flights were banned from going to Iraq. He did not even say to northern Iraq.
التساؤل السابق أن أردوغان قد طالب واشنطن.
Professor Abdel Al-Amir Alwan, Turkey's Prime Minister Erdogan demanded that Washington get rid of the PKK rebels along the border and said that Baghdad is unable to do the job on its own.
Yes, it's clear that Baghdad cannot do this job without the cooperation of the Kurdish regional government in Iraq. Today, we heard Masoud Barzani say that the PKK is not a terrorist organization and that he will not hand over any leader from the PKK to Turkey. Erdogan made two demands. He demanded that Kurdish leaders from the PKK be handed over to Turkey and that the PKK military bases be removed from the border area. It's clear that the central government in Iraq is incapable of ending the PKK's military and political presence in northern Iraq.
اتسعت خلال الأيام الأخيرة دائرة السجال.
During the past few days, there have been several disputes between the central government and the Kurdish regional government in Iraq. The Kurds reiterated that Baghdad is obligated to defend the Kurdish region because it is part of Iraq. At the same time, the regional Kurdish government behaves as if the central government in Baghdad does not exist. This was evident when the regional Kurdish government signed oil deals with Western companies in violation of regulations set by the Iraqi oil ministry. Can you comment on this?
Yes, as I said before, the relationship between the regional and central governments is ambiguous. The Iraqi constitution is the reason behind this ambiguity. It restricts the jurisdiction of the central government and gives absolute freedom to the regional government. This creates confusion between the central and regional governments. I believe this is the reason behind the current crisis, which was created by the PKK's presence in northern Iraq. The same can be said about the crisis that was created when the Kurdish regional government signed various oil deals with foreign companies in the Kurdish region. The ambiguous relationship between the central and regional governments has led to several negative consequences.
في العلاقة بين إقليم كردستان والحكومة المركزية في بغداد.
نعم، ألا ترون أن من حق بلدان المنطقة وفي مقدمة هذه البلدان
Do you believe that countries including Turkey have the right to defend their territorial unity? Turkey faces security threats along its southern border and some Kurdish movements are demanding the independence of southeastern Turkey. Keep in mind that the PKK, which spearheaded these sentiments of independence, is considered a terrorist organization.
هو بالأصل مدرج على قائمة المنظمات الإرهابية في العالم.
Yes, international law and the UN Charter give countries the right to defend themselves. In addition, the justification that the Turks are giving is convincing. The Turks say the US came to Iraq, which is hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, to protect their security. The Americans say that the US had to invade Afghanistan and Iraq because American security was threatened. The Turks say that they are fighting a terrorist organization right across their border. They say that they have the right to pursue the PKK because it threatens their security. According to international law, countries have the right to defend themselves, and some countries have practiced this right, as we have seen in the past.
التجارب الدولية السابقة.
إذا بما أنك ذكرت أن من حق تركيا الدفاع عن نفسها كما
You have said that Turkey has the right to defend itself. What do you think will happen in Iraq at the military and security levels? Do you think Turkey has the intention to invade northern Iraq? And what do you think about the Kurdish regional government's position?
في إقليم كردستان.
Truly, the Kurdish leadership is responsible. I wanted to mention this earlier. The Kurdish leadership must decide whether the Kurdish region is part of Iraq or not. If it is part of Iraq, then they should not defend groups outside of Iraq. If the Kurdish leadership considers itself part of Iraq, then it should let the central Iraqi government deal with this crisis, rather than confronting Turkey themselves. The Kurdish leadership must also lessen their sympathy with the PKK. This sympathy has become obvious, such as when the president of the Kurdish region in Iraq, Masoud Barzani, refused to consider the PKK a terrorist organization. He also said that he will not hand over PKK leaders to Turkey and refuse to carry out any military operations to address Turkey's security concerns. The Turks actually claim that the PKK has acquired American weapons, which were given to the Iraqi army, the Peshmerga, and the Kurdish regional government. As you know, more than 190,000 units of weapons were missing recently. The body of Congress in the US has talked about this issue at length. Turkey also accuses the Kurdish regional government in Iraq of providing medical care to injured PKK fighters. The Turks also say that planes carrying PKK leaders have landed at the Erbil and the Sulaymaniya airports in the Kurdish region of Iraq.
مطارات المنطقة الكردية في شمال العراق.
نعم، إذا كان معنا الأستاذ.
We thank Professor Abdel Amir Alwan, who joined us from London.
لانضمامك إلينا في هذه النشرة.
Residents in the border area of northern Iraq have begun to flee their villages, which are under attack by the Turks. Those fleeing express their dissatisfaction and concern, saying that they have nothing to do with this conflict. On the other hand, the Kurdish Peshmerga forces are on high alert, ready to confront any anticipated Turkish incursion.
Turkish shelling of Kurdish villages and border areas in the Kurdistan region of Iraq continues. In response, residents have begun to flee their villages, which are under missile attacks. The fleeing residents appear dissatisfied over what is taking place. They feel they are victims of a war that is not their fight.
This is not the first time that we've been forced to flee our villages and farms to escape Turkish shelling. We will never allow the Turkish army to enter our country.
As the Turkish shelling along the border continues, the amassing of the Turkish military is also increasing. The army is waiting for an order to carry out a military campaign that Ankara says is aimed at the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which is present on Iraqi land.
We are a Turkish company that has worked here for a long time. We have not had any problems. We have not noticed any members of the PKK in this region. Any military strike will have a negative impact on our interests.
The Kurdish Peshmerga is deploying along the border area, and they are on high alert for any impending Turkish military incursion.
It is our duty to protect our borders from any foreign military incursion. We are prepared to defend the region if our general commanders order us to do so.
On the border, Aman Fakhri, Al-Alam.
For the first time in more than 20 years, senior figures from Uganda's northern rebel group, the Lord's Resistance Army, will visit the capital to hold peace talks with the president.
The 2 decades of fighting's left thousands of people dead and at least 2 million Ugandans displaced.
One of the main obstacles to peace is that key rebel leaders are wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes, and the LRA wants those arrest warrants lifted. Farid Bassoum reports.
It's a war that's been every bit as brutal as it has been long. For 20 years, the Lord's Resistance Army, the LRA, has battled Ugandan government troops in the north of the country. The LRA says it's fighting for equality for those living in the north, Uganda's poorest region. Tens of thousands have been killed, more than 2 million displaced. Refugee camps here described by aid workers as the most squalid in the world. A ceasefire deal reached last year has essentially been respected, but one outstanding issue always got in the way of a permanent peace deal: how to deal with those wanted for war crimes. Now, for the first time since the conflict started, the LRA are sending top commanders to Kampala to talk with government leaders. Patrick Opio Makasi is head of field operations for the rebel group. He arrived at Entebbe airport after surrendering and being handed to Ugandan officials. He explains that internal fighting within the LRA is at the root of their willingness to put down their weapons.
Since I left the bush people, they are still suffering and crying, but the truth is they are tired. It is true that there is a very big rift within the LRA. It started about 1.5 years ago. It's mainly between the 2 top commanders, but there are other commanders involved.
The LRA says it wants to run Uganda along the lines of the biblical 10 Commandments. Yet, they stand accused of perpetrating massacres and mutilations, of orchestrating a 2-decade campaign of terror, torture, rape, kidnappings, and murder. Several of its commanders are wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity. That includes LRA leader Joseph Kony. While the International Court may want to try him, a deal may allow him to face justice in Uganda.
The agreement that we have entered into with the Uganda government stipulates that the people of Uganda and the government of Uganda are capable of doing their own things, of handling their own affairs, of developing their own alternative mechanism to handle the conflict. So we'll have to see how best we can deal with this and, if possible, neglect the position of the International Criminal Court.
But human rights observers are worried that the punishment be severe enough to fit the crime. It may be the only way to prevent anyone from following in Joseph Kony's footsteps in the future. Farid Barsoum, Al Jazeera.
من سيء إلى أسوأ يسير اتجاه العنف في باكستان.
The situation in Pakistan is deteriorating as the latest violence killed at least 8 people, including civilians, and injured 40 others. A suicide bomber on a motorcycle detonated himself by crashing into a Pakistani Air Force bus near the town of Sarjuda in the Punjab region. Rumors about the government declaring a state of emergency in Pakistan made former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto cancel her trip abroad. Bhutto returned to Pakistan 2 weeks ago and announced that she will be staying in Pakistan. She said that her Pakistani People's Party will not accept a state of emergency, which President Pervez Musharraf might declare if the Supreme Court considers his re-election unconstitutional.
The Pakistan People's Party accepts any decision made by the Supreme Court on the presidential election. If a state of emergency is imposed, we will not accept it. If fundamental human rights are suspended, we will not accept it. Our people and our nation will not accept it, and I know that political parties will also not accept it.
The application deadline for the presidential candidacy and the candidacy for board members in Egypt's press union is approaching, and the battle is heating up. Supporting and opposing parties are exchanging accusations about the opponent using the union for political gains. More details with Mohammed Zahar from Cairo.
The anticipated election of a new president and board members for the Egyptian Press Union comes amidst contention between journalists and the government. The most outstanding is the sentencing of over 10 journalists to prison, including 5 chief editors of government-oppressed private press outlets, which has angered journalists. The board of the press union, whose term ended recently, was criticized by government-supporting writers and journalists that it was hijacked by the Nasserites and the Islamic Brotherhood, which in turn conspired to use the union for political goals. Those in the union belonging to the Nasserites and the Islamic Brotherhood responded by saying that the government is trying to control the press union by backing journalist Makram Muhammad Ahmad, who is the former president of a nationalistic press outlet, to compete for the position of union president.
All
the activities of the union are funded by the Ministry of Information, and all the money that supports the publications comes from the High Commission. They falsely accuse me of being backed by the government, but they don't read what I write. The government is not untouchable. If the government makes a mistake, I criticize it sternly, and if it does something good, I give it credit.
The Islamic Brotherhood and the Nasserites expressed their support for Raja'i al-Marghani, one of the union presidential candidates. Al-Marghani is considered the most competitive in facing the government-backed candidate.
I think that the support of the Nasserites and the Egyptian Brotherhood or others is to help the union achieve its goals and benefit its journalists. Their support is not an attempt to combine politics with the union.
The list includes about 60 candidates, combining new faces with current members.
Aptitude is the fundamental principle in my program for running the union. It is what determines who takes the leading positions.
I stand with the Nasserites and with the communists. Therefore, I am a union member inside the union. Even though outside, I am in the Muslim Brotherhood. We're all free to choose what we want.
On the eve of the deadline to apply for candidacy for the presidential and board member positions in the union, the Egyptian press arena seems calm. However, this does not mean that the coming election battle will be calm also. Secret agreements and coalitions will define the characteristics of this election, and the specifics of these agreements will determine the intensity of the battle.
What are the prospects for success at the upcoming Annapolis Peace Summit? That's the question IBA's Eli Wagalanter put to former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Martin Indyk.
Well, I think we need to keep our expectations low. We haven't had final status negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians for 7 miserable years. So if the conference simply launches and blesses by the international community, the Arab states, the Quartet, so on, blesses the launching of a final status negotiation between Israel and the Palestinian, the PLO, that will be an achievement in itself. But the thing to look for beyond that is, will there be things happening on the ground that change the reality of life for the Palestinians and for Israelis? Will the Palestinians see that settlements are going to be stopped, illegal outposts are going to be dismantled, roadblocks perhaps removed, life becomes easier for them? Will Israelis see that the Palestinian Authority is actually making a serious effort to dismantle the infrastructure of terror and to stop violence? Those things, the two going together, progress on negotiations, progress on the ground, is what we should look for.
We've been talking about this conference, though, for 3 months or so. It's now November 1st. We still do not even have a guest list. Invitations have not been sent. We don't even have a date. It's now they're talking about possibly moving into December. How real is this? Is it just a vision of perhaps something's going to happen, but in reality?
Well, we'll see. I think that the Secretary of State is now going to step up the pace of her involvement. She's here this weekend. I believe she'll be coming back again in the middle of November. And in Washington, they certainly seem to be talking about pulling this meeting off before the end of November. So if they're going to do that, then they only have about 3 weeks to try to pull this all together. So we will be able to judge it pretty soon.
If you were to guess, who would you say is the guest list that's coming?
I think we will see, obviously, Olmert and Abu Mazen, but the Israelis and Palestinians, but the quartet, the United States, the EU, Russia, and the UN.
Okay.
The big question mark is
Saudi Arabia
beyond that.
Right.
Saudi Arabia, the other Arab states of the follow-up committee, like the GCC states, Morocco, Algeria, and the big mystery question, will the Syrians attend? The Secretary of State has made it clear that they will be invited. And that, I think, would be an important development in and of itself.
I'm very concerned. They keep every time someone mentions it, whoever makes the statement, whether it's Prime Minister Olmert and Chairman Abbas, they talk about lowering expectations. They say it themselves. Well, how low can we make the lower expectations? We're now at the point of below ground level for expectations.
Well, as I said, I mean, I think it is important to lower expectations because you're not going to get a breakthrough to an agreement on such issues as Jerusalem, refugees, settlements and so on.
The core issues, the big issues,
are complicated. And as I say, we haven't had negotiations on them for 7 years. And it's at the end of the Bush administration. It would be a mistake now to assume that you could get a breakthrough even in the next year. That was the mistake, I think, that was made in retrospect at Camp David, that we kind of drove the process to try to get an agreement and drove it into the wall. So it'd be much better if we can get the process moving and get a parallel process going on the ground and that builds confidence of both sides, because there's so much mistrust now and hatred and so on. And the reason why I think that's possible now is because everybody's in the same boat. A failure of this process will be a victory for the Islamic extremists. It'll be a victory for Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah. And the Arab states can't afford that, and Abu Mazen can't afford that, and Olmert can't afford it, and the United States certainly can't afford it. So that's what's different now, that everybody has a common sense of threat, a common sense of urgency to show that something can work. And that's why, basically, I'm optimistic.
Ambassador Indyk, thank you so much for joining us on IBA News, a man who's been around and knows the scene. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jamal Dajani, producer of the show you've just been watching, Mosaic, World News from the Middle East. Just a short while ago, we came to you asking for your help to keep Mosaic on the air. We needed to raise $200,000, and I'm happy to announce that we did it. No, as a matter of fact, you did it. More than 1,600 of you helped us to reach our goal, and I want to thank you on behalf of the Mosaic team right here at Link TV for your support. Stay informed, keep watching, and thank you again.
One Nation, Many Voices. The stories of Muslims in America. At work, at play, having fun. What is life like for the millions of people in this country who practice Islam?
And then finally I looked in my heart, and there he was. Even today, Muslims still
felt like kind of in limbo.
Now's your chance to share stories of Muslims in America in our One Nation, Many Voices online film contest. We're awarding $50,000 in cash prizes divided among 6 categories: comedy, drama, documentary, animation or music, a special category for filmmakers 18 and under, plus films under 60 seconds long. You don't have to be a Muslim to enter or to vote for your favorite films online. You just have to live in the United States. The deadline for entries is November 25th, 2007, so hurry. Check out details at linktv.org/onenation. One Nation, Many Voices. Muslims in America. Stories, not stereotypes.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.